Hello everyone, TheSkilledRoy here, back with another Legends of Runeterra video. And today we have the Kaiser reveal. She looks absolutely awesome. I'm really excited to sort of hop in and sort of see what sort of new abilities she's bringing to the game, as well as a bunch of her followers who all look super cool in the art that we saw earlier. But otherwise, let's hop right in.
Are you the hunter or the prey?
Interesting, new voice, okay. Kaiser, as we know, we saw from the leak evolve. I finally know what it is. So it's I have +2/+2 once you've been given or summoned allies with 6+ other positive keywords this game. And I believe on Twitter it did say unique, so it has to be different ones. So interesting. It's kind of like a keyword quest, similar to like Deep, but instead of getting to 15 cards, you got to get 6+ other keywords. Now other positive keywords, so it doesn't count itself, but Kaisa's quick attack would probably count as 1. So that's probably going to be 1 out of 6 right there. So you only need 5 with Kaisa. Interesting. Okay, let's go.
Here's where we make our stand.
Second skin. This was this spell that we saw a couple times on the card already. Grant allied Kaisas everywhere another ally's positive keywords. Interesting. So she can copy keywords from other units onto herself and all further copies of Kaisas you're gonna play. That's crazy good. Let's go. 0 mana 2 every turn? Damn.
I know what they are. I know how to destroy them.
Okay. Nice. Double up, Bastion, of course, let's go.
Their every move just makes me stronger.
Wait, what does that spell? What did that spell do? Hang on, let's go back there 1 second. Voidseeker, 1 mana, deal 1 to a follower. If you're evolved, deal 3 instead. If to a follower is kind of bad, but alright, let's give it a shot.
Stronger.
Nice. See with the fishes, yeah, classic. Oh man, I remember that deck.
Freaking world, huh? Let's go. Another way to fight.
I think that just said overwhelm, right? Okay. All right, seems good. Pantheon? That's to say, it's similar to Faded. Here we go.
We have something the void will never understand.
Yo, this looks so fucking good. Damn. Yo, look at our level 2 art though. Look at it. It's like way more intense than it is like. Hey, if you go back, look, like she's multiple pods now. Look at that. That looks so cool. Also, I think I noticed something here. That little circle you guys see in the background there. Watch this. This circle you see, this little arch circle thing you see in the background there, that's actually the same like structure they used to preview Kaisa from original League of Legends. I'll have it flash up on screen over here somewhere. But that's really cool actually. What a cute reference. Also, just really sick animation. Look how this go. Nice. And then so level 2, same as the level 1 ability, but then also attack, deal 1 for each positive keyword I have to enemies or the enemy nexus, lowest health first. Ooh, that's kind of spicy. That's actually kind of crazy. It has smart targeting. That's really cool. Okay, so that's like her Q, obviously, in League of Legends, obviously. Let's take a look here. Adapt and evolve. Okay. Second skin. Copies the Faded and the Barrier.
I'll show you how to fight.
That's crazy. Kaisa supercharged, 3 mana, grant an ally overwhelm and spell shield. Woo! Wow, really? That's pretty good. It's like a direct competitor to Might. It's like a Might that is better long term but worse short term. Wow, that's spicy. That is spicy. Now I know it seems crazy, but spell shield at focus speed is kind of meh. Focus speed overwhelm is also like, it's good, but it's definitely not as good as like a burst speed one. Not bad. This is pretty nuts. Obviously, it's pretty nuts. I think it actually might be fair though. Let's go. Keep going.
Gotta hit them hard.
Nice. Gets the Faded buff. Attacks. Yeah. Activates. Cathian range just blows them all up. Let's go. GP.
The void doesn't wait. Neither should we.
Void abomination. 5. I'll read this after.
What is this?
I am the path she walks.
Damn.
So long, void. See you time.
Damn, okay, let's go, Kaiser. Crazy cards. All right. I'm really excited to take a look at these. This is awesome. Now, along with Kaiser's cards, we actually got a bunch of variety cards, so let's go ahead and take a look at them. First things first, we have the 4-mana 2/5 Starhound pack with Faded. My Faded buffs are granted to allied Starhound packs everywhere. So I guess the goal here is you get a bunch of them, you play them all out, and then you can activate Faded multiple times and just grow really immensely. Now, I know a lot of people are really scared of Faded. Faded has historically been a very powerful keyword, as you've seen it on Saga Seeker and stuff like that. This card isn't as good as those, and let me explain why. First things first, the earlier a Faded card is, the better it is, right? So like, when you play Saga Seeker on turn 1, it's extremely powerful because you have so many more turns to activate it, since Faded is gated on a once per turn basis, right? Now, Starhound Pack is a 4-mana 2/5, which isn't exactly amazing stats, and then as you keep growing it, it's going to be a long time before it becomes like a threat on the offense. It's a pretty good blocker, don't get me wrong. 1 or 2 activations of Faded is going to make it really like, let it sort of gunk up the board, but like, you're not really going to be pushing much damage with it. So it's more of a defensive Faded card. And like, yes, its ability to buff your further Starhound packs is pretty good. That's something really hard to really base your strategy around unless you're like actively duplicating them. And at that point, it's kind of hard to be juggling duplication effects alongside the effects of actually like cloning them and playing them out and still progressing your board in a reasonable way. Like, yes, using iterative improvements is going to trigger Faded and get you another copy, but that just feels like you're wasting a lot of mana doing shit when you could really just be playing out better cards and just trying to kill them, especially in the Faded deck, which is so based around things like Pantheon and running them over with powerful overwhelm effects. So honestly, not a huge fan of this card. I think it's pretty decent. I think if the original Zenith Blade was still in the game, it would probably be a pretty good card. But without it, it's kind of hard to imagine this being an impressive enough offensive threat that you'd really want to run this in a Faded deck. I could be wrong though, this is entirely possible. I don't play very much Faded, I play against it a lot, and if someone were to play this instead of the other two, I wouldn't. This is the least intimidating Faded card, and that's how I'm sort of evaluating it. Alright, next up is the 4-mana landmark Trifarian Training Pits. Each round, the first time an ally with 5+ power attacks, rally. Now this card might seem crazy, but I actually think it's pretty fair. So generally speaking, you spend generally 4 mana for a rally when you're playing Legends of Runeterra, but one thing that's important to note here is that also generally you're spending 4 spell mana and not unit mana, which landmarks have to be paid for, and also you typically don't need that many rallies to win a game. Rallies generally, you kind of just beat them on the first turn you can cast them, or the second turn you can cast them, right? Like maybe you cast 1 or 2 in a game and you kind of just win the game off of that. You generally don't need to keep grinding out value by rallying over and over again, because usually in most powerful decks, 1 rally is all it takes. So while it might seem like a case for why this card is strong, what it really means is that like this card might be slow enough or in a situation where you might not actually need to rally multiple times, right? Like maybe you're spending a premium here for something that's A, conditional, and B, something you can't even do when you don't already have the attack token, right? Obviously the opponent can already interact with it by killing your 5-power unit after you play this, or frostbiting it, or doing whatever sort of things they want to do. So that's another kind of issue right there. Where I actually see this card being the strongest actually is in decks that don't have consistent access to rally or have issues sort of winning the mid game or trying to grind out value, right? This means we're looking at like mid-range Noxus decks that don't have consistent win conditions. So I'm actually kind of picturing here Yetis actually with Noxus Freljord. I think there's a real possibility where you run both of those two and you sort of try to run them over by playing Trifarian Training Pits and just play a bunch of Yetis and just try your best to grind them out. That seems like a really good possibility. But honestly, this card doesn't seem insane. It just seems fine. While it's a good card, I'm not sure if there's an exact deck list for it that really wants it. Yetis is the first one off the top of my head, but we're gonna have to sort of look at this into the future and see where this card ends up. Alright, next up is the 6-mana Freljord spell, Wild Claw's Ferocity. Transform an allied follower into an Alpha Wild Claw, which as we know is a 7/6 Overwhelm unit. So, pretty strong effect here, obviously, because you're spending unit what is normally saved for unit mana, you can now spend spell mana on instead and get something really valuable out of it. Now, a couple things are really going to be worth consideration here. Number one, you probably want to run this in a deck where your average unit's stat total is around the 5 or 6 range, because this is this buff is only going to be a huge buff if you're playing weaker units, right? So a couple things to keep in mind there. A great target for this is actually Omen Hawk. Omen Hawk is obviously a 1-mana 1/1, which can just sort of sit around and do nothing, that the opponent might not want to interact with. Maybe they're playing a sort of deck that you don't really need to feel the need to block either, and it's just sort of sitting around the board doing 1 damage over and over again. But then late game, you can, boom, turn it into a 7/6 on the attacking, like, open attack. That's pretty powerful. Not to mention, it, as far as I understand transform buffs working, it should also retain buffs. So the buffs you put, like, from an Omen Hawk onto another unit, and you play the other unit, and then you transform that into a Wild Claw, the Wild Claw will retain that +1/+1 buff from the Omen Hawk, if I understand the rules of transform properly. It's a little unclear, it's something we'll have to test, obviously, but that seems really, really strong. And lastly, one other way I sort of saw it being really interested was actually in a Heimer deck. And I know it seems strange, but think about it. You have the Freljord spells to keep your Heimerdinger alive, obviously, but then you can transform those really small turrets you get from protecting your Heimer off of like an Elixir of Iron, you get like the 1/1 turret. You can then transform it into a 7/6 Wild Claw, and you get a 6/1 elusive turret on top of it. That seems pretty good to me. I'm not sure if it's good enough to really shift from Heimer, who's currently in SI decks, to Freljord, but it's worth a shot. It seems like a pretty interesting idea. It's something worth testing out at the very least. But overall, card seems really solid. But I think it seems great because obviously Wild Claw is pretty good, and you get it for spell mana instead of unit mana. That seems awesome. But you have to remember that you're sacrificing a unit on your board to do that in the first place, and that means you want to have a bunch of smaller units, not any sort of big overwhelm deck. You probably want to run this mostly in like a smaller deck generally. But yeah, really cool card. All right, next up is the Windswept Helic. The 5 mana, when I'm summoned, draw a Yasuo and stun the strongest enemy. When you gain the attack token, stun the strongest enemy. Interesting, so this card seems to be really sort of meant for the Yasuo Malphite deck, as it's a high cost landmark, which is something that Malphite really likes, as well as giving you a bunch of stuns, as well as drawing you a Yasuo. Like, this just seems perfectly meant to sort of set up your Yasuo to start popping off and help him level him up. Now the question is though, is this enough? Like, every single expansion we keep getting more and more stun cards and more cards that could synergize with Yasuo, and yet we never seem to get anywhere with it. And why is that though, right? Well, the answer is that Yasuo isn't really a win condition, not honestly, right? Like, yes, he can kill your units, but like he takes a long time to get there, and you have to commit resources to level him, and once you have him leveled, even then you're still committing more resources to get value, and even then it's still interactable, and even then like the opponent can still like just grind you just as much as you're grinding them. And it's just like, man, this card is just, Yasuo is just trapped, man. He's trapped. He needs some way to win games. And while this is going to help him with his consistency a lot, because one big issue in Yasuo decks is that your deck is so based around your champion to get things done that like you need to draw him eventually, right? And eventually sometimes you just don't draw him. But now you have a consistent way to draw him, and that's great. But the problem is going to be now is that like, yes, you can get Yasuo on the board. Yes, you can start stunning things. But like if they're playing a win condition that can either A, stop your stuns via like spell shields or any other defensive mechanics, or B, are playing a deck like a burn deck or something where like by the time you get Yasuo out, the stuns don't even matter anymore. Like, Yasuo is in a really tough spot, and I'm not sure if a 5 mana landmark that draws a card and stuns one thing is enough to really get him there. This is a pretty substantial like ask. This is 5 unit mana, remember. This is not like Palm, where you can stun one thing, get a 3/2 blocker, all for 4 spell mana. That's pretty easy. This is like 5. This is like basically a skip your turn to draw a Yasuo and stun one thing, and that's like, yeesh, you know, like that's a lot to ask to me, my man. And like, sure, yes, you get further stuns, but they're only when you're on the aggressive, when you're already winning the game, right? Like, yes, you can stun on the attack tokens to get better attacks in, but you're not going to get on the defensive turns where those stuns are really going to matter when you're trying to sort of stall out time for your Yasuo. Like, think about it like this. On turn 5, you play this, right? You draw your Yasuo, stun one thing, and you typically want to be stunning it on your defensive turn, so you can stop one of their attackers. Like they develop a big unit, you play Windswept Helic, boom, stun, draw my Yasuo. We got this. My turn comes around, I stun your thing again, but my Yasuo is still in my hand, so Yasuo doesn't get to activate his level up abilities yet. So then I play the Yasuo. Okay, I attack, do 5 damage, whatever. Next turn comes around. I don't have the attack token, so I don't stun anything. Okay, fine. But the turn after that, then that's when I get my attack token, and that's when I stun something again. And I'm just like, okay, well, I spent turn 5, didn't stun anything. Stun one thing, didn't get any Yasuo, like, activations. Turn 6 comes around, I play the Yasuo. It's till turn 7 that I actually get to activate Yasuo's ability. And at that point, it's like, man, I've spent a lot of time doing nothing. And especially in a meta where people are gonna start running more and more landmark removal, it definitely gets to a point where you're kind of just like, God, like, it feels like I'm investing a lot for this card when it's not gonna win me the game. So there's this constant question now where how do you buff Yasuo enough to make him good? And I think the answer is you gotta give him a better win condition, because there's gotta be some way for you to win the game more consistently. Because right now it's just like your only way to win is like what I call dehydration in card games, where the opponent just can't do anything and eventually just lock them out with so many stuns that eventually you win. But like sometimes that eventuality is not eventual and you just eventually just lose because they have enough burn or ways to get around you. So who knows? But I don't think this card is going to be enough to push him into a viable status. But I do think it'll be good enough to maybe put him into like tier 3 or something. Like that's generally how I feel about it. All right, here he is, the 8 mana 8/8 Lord Eldred, Mage Seeker leader. Tough and other allies and your Nexus have tough. So obviously this is a very famous effect thanks to Lysandra, who's infamous for locking out games with her Nexus tough ability, as well as just generally being quite strong. Now, Lord Eldred here is a bit different than a 3 mana card with that ability, of course. This is a 8 mana card with that ability in Demacia and not Freljord. So it's a bit of a different type of idea here. It's the same sort of concept though. You're trying to like lock down the late game once you have gotten to it, and then hopefully you're gonna win from there. I'm not sure if tough Nexus is something I really need on turn 8, especially if I'm trying to stabilize. If I'm spending my entire turn playing this, they can still kill me even through a tough Nexus. So I'm a little spooked by trying to play this card out. That being said though, this character is an important lore figure, and I think that's really cool that we finally got the leader of the Mage Seekers. We get to see him finally, what the villain of the Mage Seekers actually is. We actually get to see him finally, so that's really cool, and I'm really glad that we get to have that element of him being added to the game. I really wish he had some sort of mage seeking ability, like, you know, like tie into the mage seeker abilities that we've already seen, or a silence effect, or a capture effect, or something. Like making your Nexus tough is like, sure, I guess. It just doesn't feel really connected to the mage seeker concept. Like he's a leader, so he buffs his allies. That makes sense to me. But like if he's anti-magic, like tough, like I don't know, it feels like Spell Shield would have been an option instead, you know? Like I feel like there's a lot of other possible choices here, especially when like getting to this stage in the late game in Demacia is just like, do I really want to be spending 8 mana 8/8 tough? Like I guess it's a tough question, because I just don't think this card is that strong main decked anyways. I think one possibility is that you can actually use this in Timelines decks, which is the deck with Trundle, where you basically play a card using concurrent timelines to shift it into another type of card, which means you can use Trundle's Ice Pillar to transform it into Lord Eldred here and get a tough Nexus basically for free. That is where this card is going to be pretty strong. But main deckable, you know, it's just not there for me. So overall, neat card to be added to the game from a lore and like a token perspective. But from a main deck perspective, I don't really see it, unfortunately. All right, here we are onto the Kaiser cards. This is the 2 mana 3/1 Belvethi Elder, which is the Spell Shield Evolve card. Evolve is you have to play 6 other positive keywords, and all of your Evolve units will get +2/+2. So pretty interesting effect, kind of similar to Deep in a way, where you have to get a quest completed, and once you get the quest completed, you get a bunch of stats. That's pretty cool. And this one is actually quite interesting. It is a 2 mana 3/1 with Spell Shield. Now, 1 health is generally pretty seen as pretty weak in this game, considering how much incidental damage there is. But Spell Shield protects you from that incidental damage quite well as just generally trades favorably because it has 3 attack. You'll typically trade into most 1 and 2 drops, no problem. So the real question is, why is this card actually being put in the Kaiser deck? Well, obviously, if you have this card out and you play your Kaiser later, you can then take her Spell Shield and put it onto Kaiser, and boom, there you go. You now have Spell Shield on your Kaiser. And until they remove the Belvethi Elder, you'll be able to keep getting your more and more Spell Shields back over and over again. That seems very strong. Not to mention, remember, it still has Evolve itself. So in the very late game, this is gonna be a 5/3 with Spell Shield. And that's a lot more threatening, especially if you happen to top deck this in the late game. You're not gonna feel bad about drawing it. So to me, it's a card whose high moments, like giving your Kaiser a spell shield consistently, that's awesome. And its low points, it's like, okay, it trades and it's a 3/1 that can't be pinged. That seems fine to me. This card seems quite good. Like, this is very much a card that like doesn't seem flashy, it doesn't seem exciting, but it's just gonna be played all the time because it's just a consistently powerful card you can just keep on the board and it just sticks around. And it sticking around is crucial for Kaiser, and if you need to trade it, you can. It's not like you don't feel too bad about it because it's always gonna trade generally pretty favorably. No one will be able to like get it for free with like a Vile Feast or like a Static Shock or anything, right? Like, this card is gonna just stick around and it's gonna trade into something valuable eventually. It blocks Fearsomes, like, card seems great to me. So yeah, I think the card is pretty good. I think you'll definitely see a lot of play, maybe specifically only in Kaiser decks, but still, it'll see a good amount of play. All right, next up we have the 4-mana 4/4 voidblaster with Overwhelm Evolve. Again, no ability text, just flat out 2 keywords. So interesting card here. I'm not too sure how I feel about this one though in comparison to the Belvethi Elder. First things first, Overwhelm, unlike Spell Shield, has quite a few more options within the region, so you don't have to run this card. The obvious one to immediately point out is Rune Runner, which is obviously going to compete with this card quite a bit, but even just cards from other regions, right? Like, you have things that like a Ballista, obviously. There's a bunch of other cards that are going to be able to have Overwhelm or other effects that are going to be a lot more interesting to you, I think, as a Kaiser player. Even with Evolve active on this card, it as a 6/6, it's strong, don't get me wrong, but like, it's a bit of an ask for you to have to work towards this while still main decking a 4-mana 4/4 Overwhelm, which, remember, Ballista is a 3-mana 4/3 Overwhelm. So, you know, it's just hard for me to really see this card as being extremely powerful on its own. Maybe it could be a 5/4. Maybe that's pushing it a bit too much, maybe. But like, the card right now is fine. I'm not sure if I'd run it, especially when you have so many other accesses to Overwhelm via Might, and of course Supercharger, which we're gonna get to, Supercharge, which we're gonna get to later. So to me, Voidblaster is the one I could definitely see you possibly skipping out on, unfortunately. It's decent, it's pretty good. It's just like, you know, I feel like there's better choices, unfortunately. Next up we have Voidseeker, the 1-mana slow speed spell. Deal 1 to a follower. If you evolve, deal 3 instead. Interesting card. Obviously, this is quite good in a scenario where you are like wanting to fight both aggro decks and mid-range decks, right? Like, on turn 1, the opponent plays like a Saboteur, you want to be able to blow it up for free. That feels great. And in the late game, you can then use this to then kill like their like 3 health attacking unit, like a Ballista, right? Like, there's some uses for this that feel good. But like, Evolve is not an effect that's easy to get access to relatively quickly. Like, I see you getting it on maybe turn 5 at the earliest. And at that point, it's like, considering this can only target followers too, you're not gonna be able to hit priority targets like Teemo or Zoe, things that are really important to deal 1 damage to, especially on turn 1. It's like, you know, I don't really see myself really wanting to run this card at that point. Like, if it said when you've evolved, you can then target champions as well, like, that's a real card we can start talking about. This card right now, it just seems fine. Like, I know there's an appeal, especially in like the late game where you get 2 of these in your hand, and for 2 mana you can kill 2 things relatively confidently. That's pretty great, but like, you already have to activate Evolve, you have to have both in your hand, the opponent has to like have no response for it. Like, there's just so many checklist things you gotta go down the list before this card becomes good, that at that point, I'd rather just run a card that's just good all the time, you know? So the card's neat, and I like how like when it evolves, it gets +2 damage, just like how the units get +2 attack. That's pretty cute, but in terms of an actual playable card in a competitive deck, I don't really see it personally. All right, next up is Void Abomination, the 8-mana 5/4 with Evolve. When I'm summoned, grant me all positive keywords allies have had this game. When I see an ally with a new positive keyword, grant it to me. Really interesting. So this really plays into the assimilation sort of thematic of Void, and when you play it, it's almost always at least by turn 8, especially with its ability, it's almost always going to be a 8-mana 7/6, so that's pretty good, with a bunch of keywords that you've already sort of pre-selected. So obviously the immediate comparison thing is things like Pantheon or the Arsenal. Those 2 cards are obviously cards that are very, very similar to Void Abomination. However, unlike those 2, you kind of have to have found those keywords that you really want ahead of time. Now, that's both good and bad, right? Like, it's good if you have a deck that can consistently get the keywords you want, like presumably elusive, double attack, lifesteal, those sort of things. But it's bad in situations where you put it in a deck that is going to be getting like quick attack, overwhelm. Like those are fine. Those are fine. But when you're spending 8 mana 7/6, like those aren't really the most exciting things you want to see in the world when things like Alpha Wildclaw already exist, right? So this card is going to be something where it's going to be more of a test to see what your secondary region is and what cool keywords are you getting from that region to give to Void Abomination, right? The obvious ones, again, are elusive, lifesteal, those sort of powerful game warping keywords. Those are the ones you're going to want to build your deck around. Whereas on its own, it's kind of just like, eh. I will say, though, this card seems insane with Viktor. With Viktor, this card's gonna be crazy. And I think, in general, Kaiser, as we get to her later, is gonna be very, very good with Viktor. And we'll talk more about that later. But I think that's where this card's gonna see its home, is with the Viktor decks. Especially because you'll be able to get like things like the evasive Poro from Poro Cannon really easily, which gives this elusive, right? Like there's a lot of really great ways to make this card powerful, as long as you're building your deck properly around it. So I think the card's really cool. 8 mana 7/6 with your choice of keywords. Feels awesome, man. All right, next up we have Voidling, the 1 mana 1/1 with Evolve. While in hand, I have a random keyword that changes each round. When I'm summoned, grant me that keyword. Interesting card. So obviously this is meant for you to sort of like wait and have it in your hand until you get a keyword that's quite powerful, like elusive or challenger, and then that way you can give it onto your Kaiser relatively easily. The issue though is that you're essentially playing this as a Poro, which is like not the greatest value proposition, especially when it itself can't get any further buffs like Poros can. Like sure, you could play this as a 1 mana 1/1 elusive, and hopefully it sticks around until turn 5 when your Kaiser's on the board. Like, it basically has to hit elusive for it to be good, because the evolve on it even is going to take you a while for you to get to it, which means a lot of the combat keywords that rely on having stats, things like quick attack, things like lifesteal, things like overwhelm, those are all powerful keywords, but they need to have a lot of stats to back up the keyword, and this thing just doesn't have it, which means that there's a lot of misses with this card. There's a lot of effects you get on the Voidling that you're like, this does nothing. I'm playing a 1 mana 1/1. And at that point, if I'm just caring about keywords, why don't I just play the plethora of like 1 mana, 2 mana cards that have strong keywords built in, right? Like I can just play evasive Poro if I want to do that with Poro Cannon, right? Like there's a lot of ways you can get keywords you want really easily and not have to have them be random and not have to make them all like 1/1s like this. So it's like, it's kind of those questions where you're just like, man, do I really ever want to run Voidling? And I genuinely don't think there's a time where I really want to, unfortunately. All right, next we have one of the coolest arts in the set, the Hive Herald, the 6 mana 3/3. Play, grant a unit and me each other's positive keywords. Interesting, so this is kind of like a Masked Mother that instead of killing a unit, shares the keyword. So really cool idea. Obviously the main sort of idea here, especially with Kaiser being on turn 5, is that you play Kaiser and then you play into Hive Herald and you have 2 really big units just sort of popping off and doing damage. And generally this will be a 6 mana 5/5 with a whole chunk of keywords. That seems pretty decent. I think it's really important to always note that the keywords are powerful, but they always need to have solid stats to back them up. So you need to really be aiming for some really high heights here. You're gonna want like quick attack, challenger, elusive, tough, right? Like you're gonna want some really, really powerful combinations of keywords to really make Hive Herald work. And because you're already sort of going really heavy in on like a keyword soup with Kaiser, it's gonna work really well with her. But obviously, again, with Viktor is another really big one as well, because you'll be able to take a whole bunch of Viktor's keywords, his whole giant, like, you know, the giant list, grocery list of keywords he usually gets, and you'll be able to apply it to Hive Herald as well. And that's where the card gets pretty strong and pretty interesting. On its own, like in an average deck, if you're not playing for the evolve, it feels like this card doesn't exist. You really need to make that evolve happen, because even if you give this thing like 7 keywords, it's still a 3/3, so like it's just not going to be very, very powerful. Sorry, I say 7, but obviously you wouldn't be able to do that. You'd activate evolve. You know what I mean? If you were to get like 3, 4, 5 keywords on a deck that can't consistently activate evolve, this card's not going to be playable. You need to be running this in a deck that can do it. So in that respect, I think it's fine. It's something that's going to be a sort of a synergistic piece, perhaps with Viktor. But it's hard to say, because I feel like Kaiser already has a lot of that sort of built into her already as duplication machine for Viktor. So do you really need to run 3 Viktors essentially, right? So it's a bit of an interesting question. We'll have to sort of see where this one lands. It's a little too expensive, I think, is my issue. All right, here it is. Kaiser's champion spell, the one people are freaking out about. Supercharge. Focus. grant an ally overwhelm and spell shield. So you see grant and you see 2 powerful keywords and you're like, this card is broken. And yeah, don't get me wrong, it's actually quite good. It's a very strong card, especially as a champion spell. Like, this is a pretty high quality spell. You're gonna see it quite a bit because you're gonna have Kaisa's copies and presumably maybe some more copies that you're already running. You're gonna see the card quite a lot. Now, a couple of things though. A lot of people are gonna immediately compare it to Might and be like, oh my god, Might's so powerful, the 3 damage doesn't matter that much. But what matters the most about Might is that it's burst speed. You're able to cast it in response to someone's blockers to guarantee your lethal damage. Supercharge means you have to pre-commit your overwhelm and your spell shield against the opponent. Spell shield is a strong keyword, but you kind of need it in situations where you can use it reactively many times, right? Like being able to stop an opponent's removal spell is really, really strong. The best times you're gonna be using this spell almost always are gonna be on open attacks where the opponent has a lot of mana anyways, which they might have a way to break your spell shields, right? So there's a lot of scenarios where this card is good, but because you have to pre-commit it, you are always putting yourself at a bit of a mana disadvantage compared to your opponent in most situations that you'll use this. Obviously, if the opponent taps out and does something stupid on the development turn for you, you can just play this and run them over, go for it. Obviously, that's fine. But in a lot of situations, the burst speed and the 3 damage of Might is going to be a lot more valuable. Also, think about cards like, for example, the Absolver, +2/+1, and Overwhelm if you level up a champion. That spell, it sees a lot of play because it's able to dodge Frostbite really well, and it's able to also deal damage really easily in situations where, hey, I'll put 2 damage on an unblocked unit and I'll put overwhelm damage on this one, right? Like, you can split up the damage really well. It's a really flexible card. This card is not that. You're not going to be able to use this card in the same way you can use Might and Absolver. You're going to have to use this in a way where you know what the opponent has, you know what you have on the board, and you've calculated it, and you're like, okay, if I attack now with Supercharge, he has no responses. You kind of have to use this as like almost like a checkmating card, or a card that like puts the opponent in such a situation where they're at an extreme disadvantage. Because if the opponent is not interested in interacting with your spells, like the spell shield's irrelevant, right? Like if you're facing like an aggro deck or a mid-range deck that just has a bunch of like really big, beefy units, Supercharge doesn't win you anything there, right? So that's an important thing to note here, right? It's not giving your Kaisa bonus damage with her quick attack, right? If the opponent has just like a big chunky 6/6 and you play this with your Kaisa, you're like, well shit, I can't do anything, right? But like, obviously you're gonna hit Evolve eventually and then you'll eventually scale up, but like, this card is strong, it's just not that strong, you know? People are talking like this card is literally the best card in the game, and it's like, it's good. It's gonna end games, especially gonna cheese people who aren't playing around it. But like, it's just fine. It's good. Trust me. I know I sound crazy, especially with how powerful the text reads. But the focus speed versus burst speed on a win condition spell, it's gonna matter a lot. It's gonna matter a lot more than you think it does. I promise you, especially at higher levels of play. So don't want to gatekeep or anything, but like this card is good. It's just not insanely good. All right, and finally she's here, Kaisa, the 5 mana 4/4 with quick attack and evolve. When I'm summoned or round start, if you have the attack token, create a second skin in hand, and then she levels up into the ability to gain the attack, deal 1 for each positive keyword I have to enemies or the enemy nexus based on whose health is lowest. So, and of course, second skin is the 0 mana focus speed spell, grant allied Kaisas everywhere another ally's positive keywords. So this is honestly extremely, extremely strong, right? Obviously, in a lot of scenarios, when you have second skin available to you, you're gonna be able to use this to sort of get some powerful keyword from your other allies and place it onto Kaisa and then go crazy with how much damage you're gonna start doing. Importantly though, because it doesn't just grant the Kaisa you currently have out the keywords, but rather grants it to all of them, even if the opponent removes your Kaisa, the next Kaisa you play is not gonna sort of lose value when you play her later, right? She's gonna be still very powerful, even when you play her on the flip. Like let's say you flip her over, the opponent kills her, you play your second Kaisa, you're still in a good position. So there's a lot of really good things they've sort of built into Kaisa here that make her like pretty decent inherently. But I want to talk to you guys about one sort of combination in particular where I see this card being very, very powerful, and that is Viktor. Viktor is a 4 mana 2/4. You play him on 4, you immediately get a random keyword on him, and then the next turn 5 comes around, you play another random keyword on him. So he now has 3 keywords, right? He has Augment, Random 1, Random 2. right? Now, he could hypothetically hit quick attack, but that's a pretty low roll. So we're gonna play Kaiser here. We play Kaiser. Kaiser's quick attack gets counted. That's 4 out of the 6 necessary keywords to evolve Kaiser, and you've only played 2 cards. And that's not counting anything you do on turns 1, 2, or 3, which are prime targets for multiple other units that have powerful like keywords in these 2 regions, right? You have the spell shield one from Kaiser's set right now. You have the challenger chompers from Baboon. You have Poro Cannon, which has elusive Poros, right? Those are 3 other powerful keywords that you can get very easily in the same regions. So that's very, very simple to get the other 2 that you need. And not to mention, Second Skin as a 0 mana created spell is going to power level your Viktor so fast it's going to be insane. Not to mention, one of the biggest weaknesses of Viktor is that when they remove him, your next Viktor that comes out is insanely weak. Like he's very, very weak compared to your first one because he hasn't had the turns to scale up. But Kaiser here, Kaiser will be able to save the progress from each of those positive keywords you've gotten and continuously keep growing with your Viktor essentially, right? And that means when they kill your Kaiser or your Viktor, you're essentially just drowning them in 2 giant units with huge keyword pools, right? And that's going to be very scary for them to fight, especially when they kill your Kaiser and you play another one that just has the same 10 keywords and is going to attack and deal 10 damage, right? Like there is some insanely powerful things you can do with Kaiser because of that, and that's where I think this card is going to be very, very good. I think Kaiser and Viktor are like a match made in heaven right now. I mean, obviously, we still have 2 other champions for this expansion to sort of check out, but I think Kaiser Viktor alone is going to be very, very spicy, especially when you factor in things like Supercharge. Supercharge, for example, is a perfect Viktor card because when you play it onto Viktor, he already has 1 billion keywords. He already has 1 billion attack because of his augment ability. So when you play Supercharge on him, you're giving him huge protection and overwhelm and asking them to deal with this huge monstrous ball of stats just flying at them, right? So that's where I see the Kaiser and Viktor's synergies really picking off, is that like they feed into each other really, really well between Second Skin and the Hextech augments for all the random keywords. Like between these 2, you're gonna just run away with a lot of games, and I think that's gonna be an insanely powerful part of the Kaiser Viktor deck. But as for other decks too, you also have things like Ruthless Raider, like the Freljord 2-mana card, which has Tough and Overwhelm. Like that's already 2 extremely powerful keywords to get on Kaiser, and that's just a 2-drop in Freljord. Not to mention all the different stances from the various stance units, like with Udyr or his followers. Like there's just a lot you can do with Kaiser that seems very immediately powerful and really interesting. And that's why I'm really excited to try to sort of try her out and play her, even though we've only seen 1/3 of the champions that are coming out this expansion. She already seems like primed for a lot of really powerful and a lot of really interesting sort of decks. And I think that's where I'm really excited to see Kaiser, because like this card seems insane, man. Like card seems really, really good in certain situations, and I'm just like, man, I think this card might actually be really, really insane. Now, one thing I do want to point out here, she does stay as a 4/4. That is important to note. Because normally most champions, when you level up, you get +1/+1, right? But Kaiser here doesn't, because they factored in the fact that she's going to be evolving, and evolve, as we know already, gives you +2/+2, which means that technically she's missing +1/+1 overall total. So clearly, I feel like that was a very intentional decision to nerf her. So I'm wondering, was she too strong originally, and they had to bring her down by +1/+1, and to see if that's enough of a nerf. So we'll see what happens. We saw this happen previously with Annie's cards, where Annie's cards were clearly tested with the more powerful skill units, like the 1/2 Buccaneer and stuff like that. Crackshot. But they were nerfed as they got released at the same time. Whereas Kaiser here has a very different sort of stat pool than normal, and I'm wondering, was she too good originally and they had to nerf her? So we'll see if that was the case or not. Obviously, we have no way of knowing right now, but I'm really excited to sort of get my hands on the deck and really try it out. I'm really excited for Viktor Kaiser. I see the synergy like right there, man. It seems really, really good. So I'm really excited for that. Otherwise, though, I'm really happy with how Kaiser sort of operates. She seems like a really cool card. Really brings together a really cool sort of archetype. Evolve is a lot more interesting than I thought it would be. I didn't think they were going to go this route, like sort of a quest system, kind of similar to Deep, which is kind of cool. So I'm really excited for that too. Hopefully, Gwen and Evelyn also showcase some more interesting sort of decks and immediately have these really cool ideas that come to the forefront right away, because I think champions like Kaiser, where you're immediately like excited to like jump in and try all sorts of combinations, is exactly the reason why LOR is so cool. And I'm hoping that Gwen and Evelyn do something similar. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for watching. That was basically all I had today for my review. Kaiser looks awesome. I'm really excited for tomorrow's cards. Probably gonna be Gwen based on the order of the reveal trailer they did. But we'll have to see from there. Anyways, thank you so much everyone for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.